Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Attitude Makeover. In the last 1 year, it's been a beautiful journey of exploration and also of self-discovery of really who am I at the core as a rebooter and what are my core values, what do I stand for, and so on and so forth. And you've been a wonderful partner in this journey for me. And I hope as much as I have enjoyed this journey, it's brought value, it's made you think as to how some of these journeys apply to you in your own journey, whether it's in your career path in an organization or you're trying to come back into a work-life alignment. How is this playing a role in your journey? My guest today is a rebooter himself. Is the chairman and co-founder of SG Analytics, Sushant Gupta. We chose a very interesting topic as well. The topic of the conversation is sustainability and inclusion. You see, they're two really talked about topics, but how do you bring a sustainable, inclusive policy and an environment within your organization? As a leader, what I've understood is all of us come with a good balance of the masculine and the feminine side to us. Over the years, through our experiences and our beliefs and our own journey, we sort of allow one of it to dominate over the other. It has its own rippling effect when you're a leader in an organization, because then you sort of lose the empathetic side to understanding the non-dominant side of you, and thereby when you define policies and changes and culture, define cultural roadmaps of how you want this organization to be, it sort of paves way into each one of them. And so this becomes a very pertinent topic of how does one as a leader look at sustainability and inclusion. This takes us through wonderful conversations around conflict management, around understanding both sides of the story, walking the talk, creating balance. How do you build a community? How do you build a space where everyone feels safe and cared for, and thereby there's an increase in innovation, productivity, collaboration, and in general a very safe space for one to operate on. This and a lot more is what we talk about in this week's conversation with Sushant Gupta in our topic, sustainability and inclusion. As always, I hope you like this conversation, and if you've liked this, I look forward to you sharing, liking and subscribing to both my YouTube channel or any of the other podcast channels that you're tuned into. And thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely holiday. So Sushant, thank you so much. We started off with trying to find out what you're passionate about, and I couldn't think of a better topic and more relevant topic as of today, sustainability and inclusion. So thank you. Thank you for choosing that. Thank you for having an opinion on that, and I'm looking forward to this longer, deeper conversation around it. I want to start off first with, it's a buzzword, right? Sustainability. Inclusion is also a buzzword. Can you define what sustainability and inclusion is?
Okay. I think there's lots of definitions out there, because it's coming from what was perhaps not right and correcting that. So what was not right is that there was growth happening in a certain way without including all aspects of nature or the world, and that in a way includes gender diversity as well. And hence it has been defined in a certain way. But the way I would like to kind of perhaps give a angle to it is just about being natural. Because if you see nature by itself, it is natural, it sustains itself and goes beyond that. It actually regeneratively grows and balances as well in harmony. So if you see nature, it is all balanced and perfectly in harmony. And it includes, it's all about inclusion. And there's no, like you don't see in a forest, a very manicured forest, for example.
True.
All kinds of trees are there, all kinds of plants are there, bushes,
They
all kinds, they coexist. So that is for me the better form of sustainability and inclusion.
And I think in a lot of ways, the AI space has a huge impact on or contribution to how we can make this possible as well, isn't it?
Should be. Again, my view is slightly different, is in the sense that no space can, it's the thought process which goes behind it, which makes anything happen. No tool can help us, no KPIs can help us, no technology can help us. It is the mindset which applied will take us back to being in a regenerative, thriving form.
So first is the mindset, and then the tools come in to actually help you with the process.
Exactly. So tools by themselves cannot be the solution. They have to be used for it to happen.
So Sushant, I always start my conversation with my guest by really getting to know who my guest is, for the audience to really connect with the guest. But I want you to strip off the CEO title and all the others to just go to who is Sushant and why is this so deeply passionate as a topic for you? Why is sustainability and inclusion, it's a marriage of these two that you believe in, and I think it's a beautiful topic to get into, but why is there passion around that? So if you can spend some time telling about you, but stripping off the titles and everything else.
Sure. So, if we all think from, whenever we go within ourselves and think deeply, anything that we've done in life is only to feel complete and happiness inside. We may have given it physical manifestations on the outside. I want to have this degree, I want to get into IIT, I want to get into this company, McKinsey, whatever the case might be, or SG Analytics even. But it always was for the purpose of achieving something inside. That is a given. We all know that by now. And initially maybe in early stages of life we didn't know that. And I must confess that I definitely didn't. But in the last 4 to 5 or 7 years around, that has become the focus, and that has become the realization as well. So then you realize that there is absolutely no difference between you or anybody else in the world, and it includes really anybody else. And you start observing people, you realize that the only thing everyone is seeking is internal happiness. So you are also seeking the same thing. It's just that because of the different exposures, different countries, different opportunities, you seek it through different means. So once that is clear, then the titles are off anyway. So whether you're chairman or CEO or VP business development of this company, that company, it's off. And you realize that that's off. That is only a means. So once that is clear, then you become aware of your true self. And now you're using whatever occupation you have, whether you're a business person or employed somewhere, or you are in hospitality or creative industry, that is only a means towards feeling that completeness inside. So now once that is clear, I am clear what I am, and in my view I am in this journey. Where I am in this journey, perhaps I would say around, if I was to, my aspiration is obviously huge in this journey, that I achieve a state of complete bliss all the time. Where am I today? Maybe 5 to 10% there, if I'm giving myself very high marks. But that's the journey. And in this journey, it's very important to be aware and to be very open with oneself and with others.
It's also about introspective, being able to introspect as well, isn't it?
Totally. And that starts with just being totally kind of open, as you said. And you can only be open when so many times, situations happen during the day because you're playing your game. Your game might be business or whatever else. And you get sucked into things.
True.
And it's very important to kind of sit back after that event and just to look at it at a different level, maybe not within yourself but outside of yourself, and then you're able to observe that, oh, this is how I behaved and this is what happened inside me, these are the emotions which came inside me, and that is why this responses came and how things could have been different. And that's so introspection is the first step towards improvement.
Now, I think for the last 25 years, when you're working in a corporate space, identity and individuality sort of become pivotal.
Yeah.
And identity is associated with either the company or the title or
Yeah.
the job that you're playing, and individuality is where a certain personality
Yeah.
sort of comes in. But what you're talking about is going deeper into character and then seeing, is the reflection of my personality that I'm putting out there aligned with my character, and sort of making those adjustments constant. That's where you're saying
Yes.
it's 5% in
Yes.
the journey. I want to understand, where did you start? Where were you when you started?
I probably was minus 90% when I started. So a lot of progress has happened in the last 3 to 4 years. Most of it in the last 3 to 4 years with the onset of COVID. So COVID it has been tragic for many people, and I acknowledge that. But it came as a blessing for me and my family, because we really got a chance to look deeper within ourselves. And that's where most of the progress happened. And of course, we came in touch with the spiritual guru, who also became our business coach. So everything got integrated well. And I'm blessed to be surrounded by in a family where everyone is into the same journey, and everyone used to ask these hard questions of me, but they would normally be bounced off with my veneer of masculine sheen up, which I used to have before. So I have 2 daughters and a lovely wife, and they were never really comfortable with me. Until now, I can say that they are, at least, and that's a question worth asking them separately, but my estimation is that I probably score well above 8 out of 10
Nice.
with all 3 of them now, and earlier score would have been a big negative.
What changed in you? Is it more you became more open to perspectives, or you became more aware of how you're reacting to certain situations? Or what drastically changed for you to shift from the negative to where you are today?
So it was a lot of work. So I won't be able to identify one particular thing, because it was a lot of work on oneself. And when say me and my wife Simi were talking to our spiritual guru, it was not as if she was saying, Sushant, you are at fault, or saying, Simi, you are at fault. She asked us both to do a lot of work within ourselves. So there was no finger pointing, and when you go deep within yourself, she had a lot of work to do within herself. I had a lot of work to do within myself. So she perhaps tapped into her empowerment, her dignity, which she had lost in the process of just serving others. And I tapped into my femininity, which I had lost in the process of achievements. So I think if the 2 main things, if I may say, were these aspects, but within that there was a lot of deep work which we went on to do and continue to do in this journey.
I want to understand, because that's where we're headed towards, right? I want to understand, when you talk about femininity, what are aspects of femininity you discovered in this journey? And it's important because we're talking about a family setup, but you're also a leader.
Yeah.
You're also in a community, and so this sort of percolates or has rippling effects everywhere else as well, right?
Yeah.
So I want to understand, how did that change from total masculinity or wherever you were in that gradation of masculinity to understanding the feminine side of things, and thereby maneuvering or creating that balance in yourself? How did how did you go about? I mean,
because I think it's all in there, so every person comes complete. So it's not as if I don't have femininity inside me, or you don't have the masculine inside you.
Yes.
We all are coming complete. We're just in different bodies for a certain role play as a body function, but otherwise we are complete inside. But since childhood, we are kind of conditioned to become so much in tune with just the physical self that we become overly the inside is lost in that journey in that conditioning. So compassion, for example, is there with everyone. Inclusiveness is there in everyone, and these are very understanding, empathy. These are so-called feminine traits, but they're there in everyone. And so it's just that we don't tap into it. Dignity for oneself is also there, but the women sometimes forget about that and lose their dignity because they are so much driven by the feminine drive to keep serving others and pleasing others, that they forget that they have to care for themselves as well. A man, if you see, there's a dining table, if men, when they eat amongst men, they all just serve themselves first. Straight away. You'll never see them serving somebody else, but when a woman is there, she'll always serve others. And when men and women there, then men get the idea, we are also, it would be nice to serve others. So it's there, it's just about tapping it. And probably the one thing which helps you tap into it is vulnerability. Is kind of, that is the shield which most of us, or the magic box which we don't open up. So we keep ourselves very, so when men hang out with each other and they ask, how's it going? Everyone will say, it's going great. Job, fantastic. Family, no issues. बच्चे कैसे कर रहे हैं? सब अच्छे कर रहे हैं. Everything is fine. Women, they hang out with each other. Within 10 minutes, they tell their entire life story, which is quite amazing. So they are ready to be vulnerable so much more quickly. So they're connected with the truth far more than, say, the men are in general. But when men open up and they talk openly, then everything comes out, and that's when the journey really starts.
I'm really fascinated with this whole idea of power of an individual coming together when you bring the masculine and the feminine together. But it's not an easy journey.
No.
Not everybody can have a guru either, a spiritual guru. So, but I've seen this, like for example, to your point, as women, whether it's at home or even at work, if the culture is such that, your opinions are sort of brushed aside, or like, you
there's no atmosphere to express.
Right? Then that's it. We go back because we, as humans, as Indians mostly, we avoid conflicts by nature itself.
Absolutely.
So you step back, and by nature, women sort of just step back and they avoid conflicts. So what you're saying is actually embarking on this journey, constantly balancing. For women also,
as important as men.
It's not just the feminine side. Get acquainted with your masculine side and see where the balance is. Stand up for yourself, talk about things. But for men, it's also about be more vulnerable, be more open, introspect. Is that the journey of consciously going through a balance?
It is, and there are many tools available, and just making sure that not only you are heard but you are hearing others is the best way to start. I think that balance, as in sales, for example, and men do it very well when they are in sales positions. They say that 70% of the time if the client is speaking, then you've had a good sales meeting. But they forget that in their normal life. They do that sales part, they use it as a tool, and then after that they forget about it. But all it takes is, so the tools are all available just to start listening to start with. If you start listening, you're giving everyone the space to express. And I think that balance between, as you said, or masculinity and femininity is a lot about expression actually. Somehow we are taught in the society, in corporate world especially, to be confident.
Yeah.
Even if we are not right, just sound confident. Yeah. You know, there are many leaders, political leaders as well, who sound very confident, but they don't have any idea what they're doing. Yeah. And they're taking an entire society or a country behind them. Yeah. And they all follow just because this person is sounding confident. But they follow the wrong path. Yeah. So same in companies. You know, always confidence without knowledge is not, confidence without knowledge is never good.
Zero.
So it's always okay to say, I don't know, so that you can first explore what is the truth together in consultation and collaboration, and then as a leader represent the truth. Yeah. A true leader will always be followed. A true leader will not be followed just for the confidence. A true leader will be followed because they're representing a great initiative and presenting a great vision for the future, which others are probably not able to see completely, but they're able to take a good grasp of the situation and then visualize how it can be projected in the future. And that cannot happen unless you are in collaborative approach to take views, and you don't dictate just an opinion.
Inclusive as well.
Exactly,
right?
completely.
So if I got this right, first is communication, the art of listening.
Yeah.
Second is introspection.
Yeah.
Third is being vulnerable. Fourth is being observant and inclusive in this process.
Because body language itself speaks.
Yeah.
You know, you're in a meeting, without hearing a word, you will know, if you're observing, who is agreeing with your opinion and who hasn't expressed yet. But just feeling, there's no point expressing because nobody is going to listen. So if you just observe body language, you can collaborate. Very quickly you can understand where others are coming from. Yeah. If someone is not mentally with you, their body will not be with you. It will show.
Yeah. I can so associate with this. I used to be a product manager in a diverse team, like, you know, in a completely dispersed, globally dispersed team. So on the phone you can sort of see, just by the voice and the tone and the pause, you can sort of gauge, are they with you? Are there apprehensions? Then it's about asking more open-ended questions.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know, but I thought you might be able to tell me, and then it just opens up the avenues for figuring out newer ways of doing it.
And some people don't like to, because of conditioning, they don't like to speak out their opinions in a public forum. So one can always approach them after the meeting, separately in a one-to-one session, and you'll get a lot of very good views and frank views in that forum. So you got to also realize that everyone is coming through a journey. So just because you are open, the other person will not get open. Of course, there's a better chance, but you have to still create an environment where they can express feelings.
How do you deal with conflict in this case? Because not everybody would be in this journey, and yet you're trying to bring all together, but there will be these sour apples or, you know, spoiled apples in between. How do you deal with conflicts there?
See, the word conflict itself is a negative word. The first part of it is a con.
Yeah.
So it's just, what is a conflict? It's just a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the lay of the land differently from what you're seeing. And it's always better to get both views. So, but if I dig in and I say my opinion, which is a derivation of what I am seeing, has to be the only opinion, and I'm not ready to see your lay of the land or opinion, that's when we create an environment for conflict. Otherwise, difference of opinion is just a very, very healthy thing to happen. Yeah. And if we don't give it the word or the nomenclature of a conflict, and instead we go towards collaboration by finding what do we agree with first. Yeah. So there'll always be something which we agree over. Yeah. Maybe it's the end objective, maybe it's the process, maybe it's the lay of the land, we see it similarly, but we just disagree on the process.
Yeah.
So start with what you agree on, and then work towards what do you have difference of opinions on. Bring in, if there's too much holding on to that opinion, then bring in a collaborator, a co-collaborator whom we respect mutually to bring all things together. And very soon it becomes a very high energy, positive environment.
Yeah, and it drives a lot of positive changes as well. I worked in a couple of companies where the culture is how you described, right? It's mutual respect. You're there in that role because you've proved your worth. You don't have to constantly prove it with me. And I am in this role because I've proved my worth. And when you go past that level of, winning over each other, validation, to really collaborating, is when a lot of innovation, everything happens. And
that's right.
Right?
Yeah. And means it's easier said than done. There's a lot of constantly not getting sucked into quick decision making. The rush energy. The decision made, we've decided before checking with everyone. Because as I'm sure you've experienced in your career, bringing about any change cannot happen without proper buy-in. And you can sign agreements, you can sign deals, but real implementation happens on the ground. And that's when you need your people. So might as well get them along at the time of decision making rather than you make the decision and then you're trying to get the buy-in. It's too late sometimes.
We have this theory in product design where I'd rather spend a lot of time on the design than the errors that we have to incur at a later stage, because the cost of it is much more.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is, I'd rather spend time to get everybody on board, understand where the differences are, and then incorporate those, and then go through this vision as against the other way of my way or highway, and then figure out as we go.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now the vulnerability side, I think that's a very interesting one. I remember in one of these conclaves, it was for Women's Day and we were talking, and I said it's about time that leadership has vulnerability as a language. And I feel that is something that's sort of missing in a lot of cases, especially with men. I might be generalizing over here, but I feel even as women, as we grow in the career path, at some point we sort of put on the masculine side of ourselves, right? So vulnerability, and I see that especially through my conversations. Like when you talk to a creator, they're very proud of their vulnerable journey. They're very proud of their, failures and the learnings from that, and it's a storytelling then. Whereas when you talk to a corporate person, it's very polished. I was there at the right time, success happened. So there is no vulnerability unless you probe a little more and a little more. So it doesn't seem to be an easy task.
Not at all, not at all.
Then how does one go through it?
One has to look at the source of where this conditioning is coming from. To solve anything, you've got to go deeper and deeper and deeper and find the source. So in my, I'm generally been quite a vulnerable person in my kind of private life. But in the corporate life, the change happened, and I still remember the day of the change very clearly, because I did my MBA from INSEAD, and I did fairly well in the class and everything. And I expected, when I was going for the interview rounds, and the first companies which come are the top companies, the McKinseys, the BCGs, and the best iBanks. And so, although my intention was to start my own company, I wanted to initially do some consulting for a year or so. So I had applied to these companies, feeling quite confident that I'll get through in one of these. And the first 5 interviews, I was rejected in all 5. And I was like a little taken aback, because I had good grades, I had a good career before INSEAD as well. I was in Schlumberger and Siemens and everything, but I didn't get selected. So I actually went for a walk with Simi. We both went for a walk trying to figure out what's happening. So they would ask me typically a question that, how many job offers do you already have? And I would just say, I don't have any right now. And the very first interview, naturally I didn't have, but by the third company also I didn't have. Normally people who are doing well collect job offers by the time they've done their 4th company interview. So I used to just tell the truth as it is, that I don't have, and I would. Second thing I would also tell them, which was wrong on, from a interview part, is like, I was like, they would ask me what are your career plans and everything. I would tell them that, look, I want to work for a couple of years and then I want to start my own company. Neither of these two would work with them. And then me and Simi figured out that, we talked to some Europeans and asked them, how do you do your interviews? And as Indians, we are taught to be very humble, play our cards a little below what we are, or a lot below. And that continues. But the Western world is very much about confidence, about projecting yourself, and many right things about that. But it is like that, and takes us a little while to adjust to it. So now next interview I went, they asked me how many offers. I said I have already 3. Within 2 minutes they said, here's the 4th one. So, I don't know what is right or what is wrong, but I learned that being vulnerable wasn't working for me. So from then on, I shifted a bit about sounding confident even when I was not sure. In my career, everywhere else. So that kind of became a pattern for a while. Until now, I must say, and I'm being really open about this, is that I'm now comfortable in my skin. So when you're comfortable in your skin, then you're fine to just say, hey, I don't know this, and I'm willing to learn this, or this is how I am, these are my weaknesses, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm just sharing this journey because how it comes. So I identified it came from there. And now I've taken it, and that's something about not being comfortable in your skin. Skin meaning nothing to do with color or anything, and just not being comfortable in yourself. In person.
I have a counter question. I'm with you so far, right? I'm totally with you. But here's my thing, like, let's say I'm a 35-year-old working in one of these companies, and I'm going through this transformation journey. Now I'm going through a change. I'm willing to be vulnerable, but you're not willing to be, you're not there as an organization, as a culture, you're not there. How do I find the balance then? Because if I show my vulnerability, you're going to judge me as it's about weak, right? If I don't show it, then I'm conflicting with my own journey over here, and it's like a very conflicting space to be in. How do you balance it?
It's a good question, and I have to think a live answer to this. If I were you, my advice would be, just as much as you project your vulnerability when required, also project your strengths. So sometimes the people who are in this journey of vulnerability overplay it and start enjoying this so much because it's new to them, that they forget about their strengths. They forget about what they have achieved, their accomplishments, and every person has accomplished a lot. Every person, actually every. Means irrespective of the CVs, if you really go deep, they've accomplished a lot. What their accomplishments are may not be relevant for that job, but accomplishments nevertheless. So find and join a company where at least your accomplishments have a good fitment and they can be used, and your vulnerabilities get a place to get worked on. And it's not necessary to pick every job that you interview for. I think interview is mutual. Many companies by brand or by outward facade look like the company you want to join. But ultimately you're joining people and culture. Only then you'll flourish. Because as they say, when people leave companies, 50% of the time they're leaving their managers. They're not leaving the companies. So when you know that, then it's better to find the culture in the company and find the best fit, where not only your vulnerabilities will get a space to, be worked on, but also your strengths can be utilized for yourself and for the company.
I had a mentor who once guided me. I had this, I think about 15, 17 years back, I had this thing of, changing from my current job to another job, Sushant. And I had this constant question of, how do I decide where to change? So one of the suggestions was, of course, alignment, like you said, in terms of your skills and your strength and fitments and all that. But more important, once you find a good fitment of all of this, the most important thing that I was given as an advice is choose your manager. To that point, I think we don't interview the manager.
We don't.
Right? There's more a one-way interview process of who are you, why this job, and think what's your aspirations. We don't go back to ask who are you, what do you do on weekends, what's your life like. Like if you are a workaholic and I'm a mother of 2 kids coming over here, I'm just doomed because you will just be working. There is no balance. Then I'll have to figure out how to sort of maintain that balance.
Exactly.
Is that something that's the right way in your experience that you've figured in the last 5 to 6 years that you've been going through this transformation?
So great point you made, and I think I always like people. I do interview a lot. My only interviews myself, which I give, is when I'm in the sales position and talking to clients. But otherwise, I'm interviewing candidates a lot, and I always appreciate, and I'm more able to connect to more positively inclined towards a candidate who asks a lot of questions from me. So I keep stopping in between as well as towards the end. I definitely keep some time aside that the person will have some questions for me as a person, for the company, for the career, for themselves, their fitment in the career. And it's surprising how few ask questions. And it's I wouldn't call it disappointing because it's a process. Because we all just in that, a lot of people just interview to get a job offer. How disappoint means it's just a waste of time for everyone. Let's just put it that way. Because they want to collect job offers and then just negotiate on the basis of salary somewhere else, or they just want to feel, they don't want to move, but they just want to feel that, they were wanted in the market. So how sad it is that they didn't feel wanted in their own companies, that they have to go to the market just to feel wanted. So reason why you're applying for a job will drive how you interview for the job. So if you're really applying for a wholesome career choice and a wholesome life, you will interview also. It will be a mutual interview. And probably that would be an inclusive interview, which will go very well. And our best people, these days when we are recruiting senior folks, we have said to ourselves, to our team, we've made a rule that if the entire interview process felt like ease, joy and grace, like real fun, including negotiation and offer finalization, everything happened very smoothly, then only let's take the candidate. There have been cases where we've selected on the basis of CV or how well they interviewed for the job, but the process didn't feel right. There was something you can always feel, this is like, it's taking too much convincing, or the candidate is convincing you too much, or the negotiation is not really balanced. Then it's better to let go because you get the winner's curse. For both sides. Both think, we worked really hard for it. But if you had to work something very hard, it wasn't the right thing.
It's also about knowing, to your earlier point, knowing your strengths and then knowing what you're wanting in life very consciously. So that means there's work involved, to your earlier point of where am I headed? Where is the balance between the holistic you? Because your you is not just the work part. Your you is home, work, and your mind and your body, everything together.
Absolutely.
So the alignment of that and where is that headed, and then seeing, okay, what I bring to the table, does it really make sense for you? And then comes the whole conversation. Now I've aligned that. Is this a good fitment to work with? Is he a great person to work with?
Exactly.
Right?
And I think we can, as people who are interviewing, we can help that person think like that also. Because they may come to the interview just thinking, I have to just crack this interview and get a job offer. But if you are very open and you're asking them more holistic questions, they open up, and that's when they may also realize that, wow, this is a perfect fit for me, or this is not a great fit. And that's the candidate you want, that's the conversation you want, really. So I think the onus lies on both sides, because this is not a new,
one-sided thing.
Yeah, and it is a new thing in a way. The standard practice is, let's crack the interview. Let's just answer what they need to hear.
I think I want to go deeper, but I'll deviate and come back to this. When you go through these interview processes, you're actually talking about two things. One is the work you do on yourself to be aware of who you are. The other is, as an organization, whoever is coming on board needs to come into this philosophy. Come on board with this philosophy. I'll start at home, right? Because at a work front, you have different age groups coming.
That's right.
You have youngsters who are just out of college, you have more senior people, you have super senior people. And these days, you have also the bracket of, the 35 to 50-year-olds.
That's right.
Culturally, we grew up differently. Our mindset is very different.
That's right.
Vulnerability is not a conversation in many bands over here. Whereas on the early stages, like the 18 to 25, it's like right there. So I want to zoom into a home, because a home is where you've got a good mix of this. How do you balance this? How do you balance this with your parents, to your siblings, to your spouse, to your children? Because that could be a great playground to actually experiment.
No, I think you brought up a very important point about this different age groups. At least my observation is that all three are quite different in their approaches towards life, or what they went through. So my age group, which is 50 plus, was conditioned at very young age for an achievement perspective. Net worth, men were conditioned to have as many relationships with women, and then only they were famous.
Really?
Yeah, means that's what the talk in college is like, how many girlfriends does he have? That kind of thing, So a lot of achievement focus and possession focus. Then I think if you contrast it with the people who are between 18 to 25 or 20, even 30, this is what I would say is the Satyug generation, which is like they are grounded in inclusion. They don't even think gender. So you don't even have to tell them about gender equality or anything. They don't know anything different. And men, women both. I'm saying that very consciously. And their whole nature, inclusion, everything is very natural to them. And they are not so much about net worth and achievement. Of course, they also love a good life and all of that, but they want to do it holistically. And then there is this middle generation caught between the middle, which kind of grew up like us, but very soon realized that, oh, this is not really what we want or what we are about. And they are becoming more and more conscious, like the generation behind them. So they are becoming more conscious. So they are starting this journey. While our generation is a little bit of in denial or shock. That whole life we lived this model, and now somebody is telling us that, this is not right. What do you mean it's not right? This is the only way it works. I'm telling you, this is the way it works. Look at me, how hard I worked in my life, and this is where I reached, and you should work equally hard. So hard thing is always inside their inside their words or vocabulary, whereas the youngest generation doesn't want to make anything hard. I see bringing it into the family context with my children. They are definitely anchored in all the aspects of inclusion, total holistic approach towards life. And yet, if at all there is something where I may need to intervene a little bit, or intervene or guide, is just to give them direction. It's more about, can they find the direction? So I'm finding that the contrast between them and us is, while we took direction just basis of whatever was the majority opinion, So if everyone said engineer, we became engineer. We didn't ever ask ourselves, do I really like to work with my hands? Probably in many cases the answer was no, but no. Engineering was the thing to do. So we went with consensus or majority opinion or whatever our parents told. So we went into a direction without thought. Their challenge is they are thinking a lot, but they're not finding the direction because they want everything to be complete before they take a direction. And what they probably can benefit from is that life is a journey. It's never, and you learn from every experience, and that you can change directions later on as well, as we realized ourselves. They're thinking, oh, if we commit, so they have a commitment issue. We didn't have any commitment issues because we were committed to wealth. So nothing else mattered. We had no commitment issues. They have some commitment issues. So that's where my role is there, and that has recently changed. Earlier it was all about, I wanted them to be like us, and that's where it was just not working because
that's where
a lot of conflict. So the same word conflict was there, but now it's more collaboration. But it's that difference which I notice a lot. And then there are I have some nephews or nieces who are more like, in Indian families, large joint families, there are a lot of nephews around who are 30 plus or in that age bracket, and you see them like really juggling the two worlds, but rather beautifully, I would say.
I want to draw an analogy from here to sustenance, right? The true sustenance of inclusion, because this is what inclusion is, because at home itself is seeing this, and rightfully as a country, when we were growing up, I'm probably not too far behind from your thing, but I think there's a generation gap there. But when we were growing up, we were chasing wealth.
Yes.
For rightful reasons, because as a country we opened up, our parents just about managed to set up ground for us. Absolutely. And we had to then from there figure out, okay, we need to build a house, education, everything. Kids are much more comfortable at this point to say, I don't have to create wealth, I need to, it's all about me.
Yes.
So it's rightfully we're going through that gradual transition. But it's also a great space to look at how inclusion happens and then to look at sustenance of that, isn't it? And if we then look at it in a bigger picture, like if you take that model to a company, what it allows for is, one, to be open to the thought process that you might come from a rigid space. I might come from a space where I'm pretty confused and transformative in nature. And he might come from, a clueless discovery phase, early discovery phase. But it's so hard when you go from one nuclear family to an organization and say, okay, now let's do inclusion in that case, because sustenance is not easy, because it's not just you, me, and another individual, which is family. It's different people coming together. That role of a leader is a little difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. If I was to really look at inclusion, if you look at a company, it often forgets that it exists in a society. And it taps all its talent and its energy from that very society. It starts actually feeling as if it's an individual just thriving in itself and by itself. That's not true. Every person that we hire is actually educated in various families across the world, provided the shelter of homes, of a good grooming, good bringing up, good values in a country, whichever has been the choice of the country or the family. So if you start actually, and my daughter said this, is that, to an earlier question also, she had asked me around 5 years back, the same question which you had asked, that, Papa, if I take SG Analytics out of your life, what will you be? And 5 years back, I actually answered back that I don't know. But today, I know, because I've included a lot more into my life than just SGA. Similarly, a company has to understand that it is existing or even surviving because of inclusion only. There is connection. There's a lot of connection. And once you start seeing all these connections, the way to run a company and way to run the organization changes completely. Even the client relationship with your clients can remarkably change. If you start including your clients, not just as people who pay you money for your work,
but in the build-up process.
In the build-up process, in becoming a stakeholder as part of the growth of your own firm. They have a lot to contribute. The employees have a lot to contribute. Their families, their spouses, their children, and you can just create larger and larger communities. So yes, I wouldn't like to say whether it's difficult or easy, but it's a different process. And anything looks difficult because it's different, because we are not used to it. Perhaps it will be much more easier way to run a company rather than difficult if we just started adopting that path. And I do talk about that path a lot, but there's a lot of inertia because there are so many set patterns which we are all stuck into. Companies are stuck into HR processes, everything, recruitment patterns, you know, and so on and so forth. That it doesn't happen. But if you see some time back, if you saw companies such as Tata Steel, Jamshedpur city, they set up an entire city based on an inclusion methodology, right? Bokra steel plant, again, coal mining industry. My dad was in the coal mining industry, and we used to live always in communities. You know, colonies. It was such a beautiful childhood I had, thanks to lovely parents that I have, and this colony life. You just went into each other's houses, you studied together, you clarified doubts together, you ate in each other's houses. That came because somehow the mining industry saw its people as a community, not just, they didn't see just my father as an employee, they saw his family as a stakeholder. So if we, and my wife has been, actually it's an interesting point you said, because Simi has been saying that since the start of SGA, that we should have a community approach, we should have our own colony, or our, you know, where everyone from SGA family lives together and they hang out with each other, and how easy recruitment would become, how easy retention would become.
And you don't normally quit when you've got deeper, meaningful friendship and relationships in your office, right?
My dad didn't quit any job. And they had a wonderful life. It was not as if they didn't achieve much. I'm not saying one doesn't have to quit at all or change jobs, but if you look at the frequency at which people are changing jobs, these days, is it really giving them meaning? They have to ask that question themselves.
One question I wanted to probe a little more there, Sushant, is as a seller, when I was doing sales, it's all about customer experience, it's all about revenue, it's about the growth. But a company cannot grow with just a customer being happy if your employee experience and your employee journey is not taken care of. So what you're saying thereby is, as a leader, it's more a top-down approach than a bottom-up approach. But it's also important to sort of give the same balance between the customer experience to employee experience.
100%. And I think we've learned that over a period of time. We didn't start like that.
We as an SG.
As an SG, it was always about customer experience. So we had a customer first policy. That's the standard policy for any services company. But it's not the right policy. The policy should be customer first, employee first, society first, all stakeholders are equal. And only then the customer really flourishes. Only then the company really is able to provide the best service. And there have been cases in our company where we have not done that. And we are now changing that. And it takes a lot to change that, I'm telling you. Because, you know, you may have to sacrifice revenue in the short term for that. You may have to learn to say no. And I think it's always good to say no, because then when you say yes, you can really do it with joy. And you cannot just work for revenue. So And even the clients, they actually want that. That's the surprising thing. If you dig deep, every client wants that. The client will only exploit you as far as you want them to exploit you.
I love that. Wow.
So you stand up for yourself, the client will enjoy that, and they will also flourish, because ultimately good things rub off, and they will also grow because every client is finally a human being.
Yeah.
So they'll also grow as human beings. You may have a few disagreements, but if you were meant to do things together, you'll grow together.
I had this one interview with the math company's founder. So Sayan is a good friend of mine, and we chose a topic of behavioral economics on the supply and demand side of organizations. And this was an important aspect that came out, which is a lot of investment and effort goes into understanding your customer journey, customer behavior. But if it is at the expense of your employee experience, where the supply comes, then there is an imbalance.
Yes.
And it's when you as a leader have sort of gone into the depth of both, understood both, and gradually transition to that stage where it's not like I'll just pull this more and this next.
No.
It has to be together.
Yeah.
So you said when you started, it wasn't that way,
No.
and you gradually went through that.
And we're still going through that.
What are some big ticket things that you had to really pull together and say, oh, we need to change this?
It's working on your brand. Most companies don't really work on their brand.
Talk a little more about this.
So 2 years back, and it was just 2 years back, again with my coach Meenu, under her guidance, our entire senior team sat together and said, we have to define our brand architecture. And prior to that, we had only defined the values. And honestly, they were only meant to be there from a behavioral perspective, but were they really kind of all captured together with a sense of what we want to be as a company total? No. So we sat down and we said, what is our brand promise? You know, as a brand, you should have a brand promise. So after a lot of brainstorming, we came up with life's possible in an optimistic flavor, which means that anytime any SGA person interacts with anybody else, whether a colleague or a client or a vendor as well, or just anybody else, the other person should be left feeling this emotion that life's possible. So that is number one thing which we said. The second thing we said is that what is our main theme? So main theme is to enable efficient, scalable realities.
Efficient,
scalable realities. So we are an enabling company. As a service company or as a product company, you're an enabling company. So, but we introduced two other words, efficient and scalable. Big difference between scale and scalable. So scalability only comes when there is not only efficiency, but there's dignity for both sides, for all sides involved. Otherwise, it's not scalable. It will break somewhere. So what you're talking about, respect for the employee, is within that part of scalable. Realities meaning possibilities for the clients, and this should be felt for the employees as well. So they should feel the same, that by joining SGA, that's what they get. So the one thing that you asked, what was that one thing which changed this, is now us going back again and again back to these two statements whenever we are confused for direction of how we should behave, is helping us a lot. But are there times when we don't operate under pressure at all? Of course, we operate under pressure. There are times. But someone amongst the senior team needs to sit back and be the devil's advocate, or be the contrarian, not the devil's advocate. That's again a word I don't believe in, but it comes so easily to your vocabulary. That, just make us hold back and say, are we really standing up for ourselves? Are we standing up for our employees? Are we even standing up for our client? All that, when it is in harmony, that's when the perfect scale happens.
where does inclusion come in this? We've talked about so far is about culture, of building this culture of a balance between the demand and supply. We've talked about being vulnerable. We started off with a feminism, a feministic and the masculinity and a balance between them. In this process, as you're going through this, what's the role of inclusion? Because so far, this is more like a culture setting of a company. It's okay if you don't have women, it's okay if you don't have the other genders, but I'm probably generalizing here. But I want you to talk about how inclusion really changes the game over here.
Do you mean inclusion from a gender perspective, or you mean inclusion as a generic word?
Inclusion for me is not just about gender, right? Inclusion could be very diverse backgrounds coming together. Like for example, when I was working very early on, I came from Bangalore. I studied in Bangalore. I traveled, worked in the US and all, and I came back. For the first time I experienced my peer groups were from tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. They didn't study English till post 12th grade. They ramped up on English because that was the need of the hour. So they have their own, insecurities. They've come a long way. To your point, everybody is an achiever because they've come a long way. But it's on the other person's eye, it is like, oh, okay, tier 2 city person, right? It's diverse. But how inclusive are you about this diverse nature of, people coming in, and this could be your customers, this could be your vendor, this could be your employees. How does inclusion impact in this whole process?
So here I must say we scored very well right from the start.
Okay.
We had a very inclusive process, and we continue to have that. If you look at the Indian cricket team, it has flourished since it has become more inclusive and not just taking people from Bombay and Delhi. Dhoni didn't come from Bombay or Delhi, and he didn't play cricket the conventional way. And look at how much that brought to the game. So same with us. I think in this we don't have any standard set patterns that we have to recruit from certain colleges or certain cities or even certain countries. Yes, we have our delivery based in India, but I would very much welcome now with this work from home flourishing our employees to be from all over the world, from different backgrounds. In fact, there's an initiative which we are talking about right now, we haven't started yet, that why do we even need necessarily a college education? Many of the college educations is just a conditioning job, just a certification that this person has done something for 4 years or 3 years. But otherwise, the skills that you need, the talent that you need, you can spot that after 12th grade as well. And pick up is not the right word, but include and bring people from villages, from small towns. And now small towns are anyway into the loop with this work from home. Now, earlier, before the COVID, most, probably 90% of our employees were either in Hyderabad or Pune. Now I would say not more than 60%. Because all the new growth which has happened from cities outside of Pune, from small towns. We just ship them a laptop and they're part of the system. We don't check whether they are from this college or that college, as long as they're part of the, they're ready to be a productive part of the company. So there, I think we've done well, but do we need to do more? Absolutely. And very consciously, because again, what happens is set patterns start getting followed. And somebody needs to constantly keep breaking the patterns. So suppose you got like 20 people from one city, now the format becomes let's just recruit from this city, and it becomes the easy way of doing things, but not necessarily the right way. So agree to what you're saying. In this aspect, perhaps done a little better, but lot to do.
So what you're also saying, Sushant, then is once you've got the brand value and you've got a strategy around it and you go through this, as you onboard new folks into the system, one part of it is, are you following that brand value or do we have to make course corrections?
If so,
Yeah.
aligned with that bigger
Yes.
vision, how do we go about it?
Yeah.
The second part, what you're saying is, in order to be more inclusive and sustainable in this process, it's also important that you make course corrections in the way we are hiring, in the way we are interacting, in the way we are communicating, in the way we are collaborating across. So that means every individual, is there a training process that you go through in order to build? It's a tough one, because
It's a tough one.
see, I can come from Bangalore with the mindset of oi,
Yeah.
whereas you might
Yeah.
come with
Yeah.
who is she to ask me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
The attitude can be so different from
Yeah.
different backgrounds. So it becomes almost like a regular exercise of maintaining that balance,
Yeah.
which means that various departments, whether it is the HR, whether it is the L&D, the leadership team, or cross collaboration across disciplines, all of them have to walk the talk, which essentially is like running a country as well, right? Like all
It's
of
a
them
small
have to-
country. Running a
Right?
company is a small country, and that's when you're running a company, your respect for those who are running a country
It's
goes.
more.
It's like
Yes.
you think, wow, you know, here I'm like figuring out things within 1,000 odd people,
Yes.
and this
And-
lady or this gentleman has to figure out a whole country.
Yeah, and we in India are, I think, like diversity hub. If you
Yeah.
actually look
Yeah.
at it, we whole of Europe can fit into
Yeah.
part of India, right?
Absolutely.
So it's so diverse. So I'm curious to understand, because when I was doing sales, here's my reason for asking
Yeah.
this. When you sell, it's not the solution or the technology that is a bummer.
Yeah.
It's the complexity of adopting to that solution
Yeah.
with the culture that is there.
Yeah.
That is the most difficult.
Absolutely.
So culture, as much as we talk about it in a very frivolous way, has a business impact as
Yes,
well.
it has.
Has a revenue impact, has a sustainability impact, it has a larger impact. And you see that at home, you see that in a company, you see that in a country as well. So I'm curious to understand, how do you sort of,
Yeah.
as a leader,
Yeah.
I want to walk into your head to see what's that lay of the land. Yeah.
Equalizer. I think meritocracy is the common equalizer.
Okay.
So that has to be like really there from ground up. If that is there, then everyone is equal. Firstly, you're starting with that premise, and that's not even under question. If you have to even say that, there's a problem. I would say in SGA we don't have to ever say that. And so meritocracy, and then general behavior of the leaders. You know, everyone's watching the leaders. So are you hanging out with everyone, having a sense of humor on the floor? Humor is a great equalizer as well. So it just takes away all the inhibitions and everything else that comes with it. And to some extent, if I may say, not being politically correct always. And I know I'm probably making a controversial, but if you're always too stuck up about every word that you say, you will never be free, and you'll never allow others to be free or to make mistakes. So you can say a word, and if you realize this was the wrong word, you just say, hey, I didn't mean it this way, and move on. But if you're too uptight about every word, communication is not very clear. So I believe in more sense of humor, more jovial, fun on the floor, rather than making it too, you know what I mean, it's like uptight about things. But there has to be zero tolerance about certain things. And we have introduced complete zero tolerance about certain things. Now, when you meant meritocracy and equal, one of the main, women are the ones, in my view, who face the maximum, force against their growth, because they are branded in a certain way. When they speak up, they are spoken of as arrogant or angry. Oh, she's an angry woman. But when a man speaks up, he's being confident. So the area where I want to focus, I don't think we have, in general, any major such issue. But the area where I feel we need to handhold a bit, to bring it out to a certain level where then the thriving starts, is the is getting the women to grow in the organization more and faster, and not be branded as non-career oriented if they are having a baby, for example, or if they are getting married. So for example, when you're recruiting a woman, there's always a question floating in the room. If it's a single woman, then when is she going to get married? And if she's going to get married, then she will probably leave the job and she'll go to the city where her husband is. Now, I have found through, and I had the same opinion several years back, but I've looked at data in our company, and the data reveals that the women have the highest retention, far more than men, almost double, because they are not looking for just the next highest salary or the next highest excitement. They're looking for where they belong, where they are heard, where they feel like they can be themselves. And I'm happy to say that in our company, women do feel that, and that's showing in the retention rate. And they've gone through, we've recruited many women who started as single, now are mothers, and we've been with them throughout this journey, and they have been with us, and they feel SGA as their own company. But there's a lot of resistance still, and main resistance is within themselves only, where they don't want to express themselves, and they only think that, oh, this much is enough for me. I'm okay having reached a senior manager position, that's good enough. They don't want to reach, go beyond that. So it's also encouraging them and bringing more women in the overall work stream in our company, and perhaps hiring a few laterally at very senior levels.
I think one thing I've observed there, and we were talking about it outside, is so the biological nature of women in the body changes, right? The hormonal changes are really massive and go to 35 to 45. And I feel that understanding of what one goes through there as a woman is sort of missing. Both for women and for the men. And I think it's important for both to understand that. Because to your point, it's not that aspiration fizzles out. It's more, you're going through so much.
You think that
there's chaos already, and it's like, okay, that's something I don't want to take right now. But having a mechanism or a system in place which allows for that room for this
brilliant point.
Understanding both from the men's side also, and the women's side will allow for you to start building that leadership, because otherwise it's like bullying in school, right?
Totally.
Right? There's the loudest voice, there's passive aggressive behavior and all of that. Especially when you're going through the 35 or post your delivery, a woman's journey is very different from a man's. And I think to your point, if we go by that whole philosophy of family, community, company, organization and country, there's change that is required, and there's masculinity and femininity on both sides at all these stages. For the woman, it probably is being more expressive about what you're going through and sort of discovering, and accepting it and saying, okay, this is part of the journey. And so I need to be communicating that to create that space for me to be comfortable in. But it's also important for a man in the company to understand what she's going through. And probably in this way also culturally change the role of a father at home as well, isn't it?
Totally. What a lovely point,
Right? Because I think that's when you bring a true masculine, feminine balance on both sides. And you're really, truly walking the talk. Probably it's a lot of responsibility on an organization as a leader to take, but I think in the long run there's a bigger impact out of it.
Absolutely.
For both of them.
Actually it's not a lot of responsibility. It's the right way to do things, because otherwise it just becomes the hard way. And you are excluding 50% of people from understanding them. How can you flourish if you don't understand 50% of the folks in the society? I mean, it's just not possible. So if you move from surviving to thriving mindset, you've got to have this inclusion and this inclusive mindset where you understand women, their journeys, give them the space for them to express and educate you. But honestly, last point you mentioned about the fathers themselves to know that, because everyone in the company is either a father or a mother or
a
you know
child.
or a child or a
Sons,
young adult. And you know, people keep saying, and I keep going back to the same thing, is that we don't need to bring up our daughters as sons. We actually need to bring up our sons and to understand, for them to understand women and girls better. And if we do that there, then there's no sharp change which needs to happen, you know, because they have understood they've understood their sister and their mother already well. So they'll understand women very naturally. But those who haven't, and I'm one of those, for me it was a big change to bring that understanding even. It all came as foreign understanding. Because we were 3 brothers and my mother was, she's a great mother, but she didn't get a chance to educate us on what women go through or feel like even.
Which is the reality of most of India, isn't
most
it?
of India and even many parts of the world is like a very male dominated, all the media, titles, everything. If you see cross section, it's still 90% male dominated themes. Yes, there are occasional intrusions, which is great, and this intrusion should become a flood more and get much more balanced. Then I think people will be educated. It will be very natural for people to understand. And I agree with you completely that in the long term, absolutely, losing your workforce just because they are going through a different period, not a difficult period necessarily, a different period, where they can be, either they can take some time off or they can be used in a different way, where traveling is not required and more support systems are available for productivity to be there, can give very good long-term returns. So even in means ultimately profits will be thriving, which is also an important purpose of a company, if people in the company are thriving.
And I think as a leader, it's a great space to see how you're really impacting that at a ground level, right?
Yeah, and that is certain measurements you ought to also introduce in the company. So while we introduce, you know, everything else is there, revenue per employee, KPIs such as EBITDA, profit per customer, revenue per customer, and all of those are there. These are very important things to also introduce as measurements that you do engage with your people to understand how they're feeling about these softer aspects. And I'm lucky that now, having appointed a full leadership team, including a new CEO, I am in the chairman role now. And as the chairman, I would say that is one of my, should be and is my main role, is to see what is the direction that we are heading towards as a culture. And that pulse of the culture I should always have, so that I can, together with my team, make sure that we are on the same page on this in bringing about this change.
I do see a larger rippling effect, if I can call it that, Sushant, because when you do this in your organization, your customers are seeing it, your vendors are seeing it, your teams are seeing it, and thereby the rippling effect is in those organizations, in these homes.
Absolutely.
And so there's a bigger impact when done the right way. But it is not an easy task.
It's not, because there are a lot of set patterns and set decision formats which happen, and you don't even get to see all of them. But you got to keep an eye on the ground and see the overall pulse of the organization. Is it moving in that direction? It will take several years to get there, but it will happen. That I'm sure about.
Would you then at some point look at, as an organization, am I balanced with the masculinity and femininity side equally? Or how would you look at it from outside to see, is this really working?
No, absolutely. I think the measurement criteria that we have put is that everything in the company and by the company should be happening with ease, joy and grace. So when you put that criteria, then it can only happen when there is both gender inclusion, gender equality, gender expression in there. There is not only with gender but with nature as well, where, you know, for very simply put, people should not feel that it's too hard to work here. It's
Monday mornings are not tough to
are not the blues, you know, and it's a pleasant atmosphere, and we create the perfect harmony between people who are coming to the office every day, between those who decide to work 2 to 3 days from the office and rest from home, and those who are not in the main locations and they decide to totally work from home. There should be, like, everyone should feel comfortable with that and their choices.
Have you taken tough decisions in this process? Because all this while we've been talking
Yes.
about being nice, being vulnerable, being open, listening, communicating, all great things. But there's also misuse.
Yes, it is.
And so have you taken the tougher decisions of, hey, I'm calling this out as not a culture fit and thereby...
Yes, so there's a culture fit and there's a business fit as well. So I have taken, for example, the decision, it's not a tough decision, to encourage people to start coming to the office at least 2 to 3 days a week, because we do need to meet each other, because there's so many new employees whom we've not met. So I've taken that, although it, you know, in the press it's not a very popular thing to say, but it has to be encouraged for us to meet in some format, because only video format doesn't develop that human connection. And working with each other and in a company is also about human connection. It's not just about your salary and productivity. And I would not like to think that every person can be only equated to the KPIs and the salaries. We should know each other. So from that, what we've done is explain the reason. So, and for people who have a long commute, told them that you have an option of obviously only coming 2 to 3 days a week, but choose those 2-3 days, and the rest you can work from home, or whenever you need to work from home, there's always work from home. So that's one area where I have along with the leadership team, we are encouraging people. We're not putting a do this or kind of approach, but encouraging them. The second tough decision, it's again not tough, but it came very easily. We have an absolute zero tolerance policy about men speaking in a certain way about women. So there's a zero tolerance there, and there's just no excuse available to anybody. And guess what? Once this cultural change happened inside a few of us, we didn't even need to communicate it too much.
Because the leaders are walking the talk.
Yeah. So it became the norm. Means it's not as if we had to scold anybody. I just don't see it happening at all in our company now. And I'm sure that if somebody does make that, what I think is a big mistake, then someone will be there to correct it immediately, and in a polite manner, without making that person too embarrassed about it, but in a polite but very firm manner, so that the other person gets it, why, rather than, oh, what are we talking about, this is the way we talk and all of that. You know. So there I'm very, very happy that we have absolutely zero tolerance, because you also as an organization need to have zero tolerance on certain things. So these are some of the things, but of course it's a journey, and we continuously make some mistakes, get tempted for fast decisions, rush decisions, but if you introspect at the end of each day, end of every week, you are certain to have a better decision making the next day or the next week.
True, true. Well, Sushant, it was a beautiful conversation. I think just getting into the mind of a leader and then understanding how do you look at sustenance and inclusion, sustainability and inclusion holistically as an individual, and then scaling it to an organization and also a family. I think it's important that each one of us introspect first on it and then take the plunge of going through that journey. To your point, when you started, it's a 7-year journey that you've gone through, and it's not an easy journey. It's a very conscious journey that one goes through. and I hope more and more people go through it. But thank you so much for making time. I do have some, customary questions we ask.
Sure.
The first one is, what does Attitude Makeover mean to you?
I think it's a platform, very interesting platform for people to speak about many things which affect all of us, and speak about in a very open conversational manner. So I think it's the relatability that it means to me.
Yeah, that it means a lot for me, because I think for me, one of the things when I started was to speak my mind.
Yeah.
Because when you're in an organization, you're constrained by a bunch of things. But when you're the organization,
Yeah.
how do you speak your mind? It's hard. Because to your point, there's validation and a whole bunch of, you're running a business as well. But then where do you stand your ground and put your foot down?
That's true.
I think it's very important. The second, from this conversation, I've had many takeaways, whether it was the power of listening, the balance of femininity and masculinity, how do you sustain this, both in a house and then the rippling effect across organizations. What are some takeaways you're going away with?
A lot of them. Actually, when you speak in such a flowing conversation, and where diverse set of questions are being, or topics are being discussed, but they're all related in some way. As you speak, you also get clear. So many things got clear to me as you were speaking. Also, I was listening, and then when I was speaking, they also got further clear. And so firstly, one takeaway is that there's a lot to do here, and it's a continuous listening and adopting journey. And the second one, big one, was when you talked about what a woman goes through during their 35 or motherhood, post-motherhood period, and how understanding them and giving them a space to express themselves then can really make a big difference. And I think that is, for me, a big takeaway which I'm going to take to action or implementation within our
I'll give you one more. I think another thing I noticed is we are very comfortable because we're caregivers and we take care of a whole lot of stuff at home and all. We're very comfortable with operational stuff. We're not weak in math.
No, not at all.
But we sort of shy away from finance and finance awareness or finance work.
Yes.
And I think if that is something as you come into an organization, you sort of break that
ice,
and allow for one to take the plunge and be flexible around it and play around with it. It goes a long way in your career journey, because if you actually look at the 35 plus, when you're becoming leaders, we don't take so much of the money related roles.
Yes.
We take more of the operational sort of roles.
Yeah, people related roles.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're good there.
Yeah, very
But
superb.
we're not bad here either. At home, a lot of households are managed by women.
Yeah. Entire budgets are managed by women.
Yeah. It's just that, to your point, our language to ourselves is, oh, I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Right? So it starts with us.
Yes.
But opening that avenue for that awareness, maybe it is just of how the business model works. Where's the cost? Where's the revenue associated with it? Can you calibrate that? I'll help you initially, but it becomes part of you as you go through it. Then as you build your second and your third layers of leadership, it becomes more clear for the woman as well. It's not like a hard task.
So, great point you mentioned, and I've experienced that with my own wife and daughters, that they've always been shy of numbers in front of me, because they think, I'm gonna judge them and all of that kind of stuff. But recently, as I've become a better listener and Simi finds more space to speak about even business matters, and increasingly so very openly about business matters, I feel that the insights I get from her are things I could have never thought of. but they don't come in very specific language.
Yeah.
The kind of language I'm wanting, I speak. She just speaks a different language, but comes to a brilliant point. She perhaps goes around like this first, but then when she makes the point, it's like it is often been an aha moment for me. Earlier, I would just break her off while she was going like this, or come to the point, and she would just give up and say, I don't want to say anything. But now, since she has the space, she does come to the point, and it is often much more valuable than what I could have done myself. So you're absolutely right. If you just give that space, and even, like you were saying, revenue minus cost is profit. But there are many other formulas of profit also.
Yes.
You can derive through other ways to get to the same profit.
Absolutely.
But we think, no, it has to come in this format only. It can come in many other formats. So I take that point as a big takeaway. Thanks for reminding me.
This was something I learned in my, I think, second job. I took up pre-sales, and sales is all about numbers, and I was like, numbers nahi hoga. But then I realized it's not so bad. I ran a wholesale cigarette showroom while I was working in this company, and when I was running that, this is a Guju family who really took me on board, and it's the size of a metro. This wholesale cigarette showroom. And so you have trucks and inventory management, cash flow, the whole gamut, right? Including customer experience. That's the first time I really experienced it in its totality to understand, oh, it's not so hard. It's just here.
It is.
But once you go past that, it's easier to maneuver through it. It's still a learning process, and companies have to sort of incorporate different ways of making it interesting. But I think we as women shy away from it completely.
Well, look at analytics careers. There's so many women in analytics careers, and they're flourishing. So, this notion that women are not good in maths or anything is it's totally wrong. It's totally wrong. Means if you were talking about an analytics career group where mostly women are there, and I know so many women who are leaders in analytics, and they're doing extremely well. So. In fact, I was in an group interview process where somebody questioned this, and the women we were interviewing, she really pushed back and said, who said women can't be in analytics? And when you look at the numbers, it's true, they are very much there.
Well, Sushant, thank you so much. I hope you had a good conversation as much as I enjoyed this.
I really enjoyed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.